Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Happy 2023, y'all. Oh my gosh, a lot of stuff has happened since the last time we was all together. I mean, it's just been insane. But now we can all stop, take a breath, relax. We made it through another one. And the holiday season is almost, but not quite officially over. Um, it's been nuts. It's been absolutely insane. And the more I think about it, I don't think I'd have it any other way. I mean, I am honestly blessed to have the family I've got, to have the friends that I've got, and it's just great to be in the middle of the hoopla. And yeah, so anyway, let's get on with today. The first live stream since, well, for 2 weeks. I did not go live last week because it was Christmas Day. We weren't home. Um, got to spend some time with my daughter, my grandkids, and just my daughters, both of them, and grandkids, and with my wife's sister and nieces and nephews. And I mean, just the whole thing. I hope you guys all had a good Christmas. But we got a lot to catch up on, a lot to do. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I know that Percy has the first question here. It's 1:30 a.m. or probably close to 2 a.m. where he is now. And his question is about dish bits, bowl and dish bits. Been using a 19 millimeter, roughly 3/4 inch dish bits to make 10 by 10-inch boards, taking me an hour per unit. Oh, wow. Using a conservative 1 millimeter step down. Can I increase the step over? Well, I have a couple of questions for you, Percy. I guess I should have asked this before. Number one being, what is the shank diameter of your bowl bit? Your bowl and tray bit. Now, I have one here. I didn't know this was going to come up, or I'd already have links in the description. This is a white side bowl and tray bit. It is 3/4 inch cutting diameter, so probably should be very similar to the one you're using. And but it has the 1/2 inch shank, which is, I'm jumping over here, 12.7 millimeter is the shank size on this. Now, I see you just said you're using an 8 millimeter shank. Let me see what that is in imperial. 0.314. So you're looking at, that is a slightly smaller shank. If you have the capacity, and I'm learning this myself, I've had a 1/2 inch shank for my router on my Gatton CNC, but I didn't use it very often. I did a little bit, but with the Avid CNC, with the 4 horsepower spindle, I'm using more and more 1/2 inch shank bits. Now, I don't know what the metric equivalent is. I can give you the metric equivalent to 1/2 of an inch, but I don't know what is regularly sold with spindles or routers in your area. So, okay, you say you also have a 12 millimeter shank. Um, I would I would use that. Um, I have really come to understand the value of the larger shank bits, in that you can push them a lot faster, a lot deeper, and just basically a lot harder than you can with the smaller shanks, without compromising cut quality, and with also with adding a, a bit more reliability. Now, that's a double-edged sword because it's also more expensive. Um, Case in point, I have a 1/2 inch ball nose bit, just a standard 1/2 inch ball nose bit, and it's right at $85. That's a lot of money for a ball nose bit. And a lot of people would question if that's actually even worth it. For what I have used it for, yes, it was worth it, but that's a lot of initial outlay. But let me show you what I'm talking about, Percy, as far as um, the difference in the shank diameters and some of the things that you can do with that heavier duty bit. Let me go into my tool database here, and these are all numbers from Whiteside. This is directly from Whiteside on this particular bit, and it's the Whiteside part number 1374, 1374. I will put a link to this bit down in the description of this video as soon as we're done live here. And you can see that the pass depth, the depth of cut per pass for this bit is 1/8 of an inch, and which equals out to a little over 3 millimeters. So you're looking at being able to take a 3 millimeter bite out of that material rather than that 1 millimeter per pass that you're taking now. Now, if you're not comfortable with taking 3 millimeters, you can drop that down to 2 or something of that nature if you would prefer. The step over, Whiteside recommends 53%, which equals up to not quite 0.4 inches. And I ran that, the metric equivalent to that is a little over 10 millimeters, 10.09 millimeters. So running that that bit with a 10 millimeter step over is going to reduce that it's going to reduce that amount of carve time because it's able to take a bigger bite. Something else to think about is the size of the bit itself. This one has the 3/4 inch radius, cutting diameter rather. I have another one here. This is the 1376 that has a huge 1 1/4 inch cutting diameter and 1 1/4 inches. Let me run that here, 1.25 inches. That's a 31 millimeter, 31 3/4 of a millimeter diameter. That's a much bigger bite. And if we look at the numbers on this one, running a 50% step over 0.625, that is a huge, huge bite that it's able to take out. 0.625, that's 15 millimeters. It can step over and clear out. So if you have that capability, if you have that option, if your machine will allow you to use these larger bits, that's the benefit. I mean, you could be cutting your times way, way down because an hour per unit, yeah, that is very, very slow. I kind of wonder what type of feed rates you're running with that 3/4 inch bowl and tray bit. And I don't know what units of measure you work in as far as velocity for your feed rate, but we're looking at Whiteside recommending 100 inches per minute. I don't know if you're using millimeters per second. Let me do a little bit of math here. 100 inches per minute in millimeters per second. That equals out to 42 millimeters per second. I don't know if that's going to speed up your cutting times or not. But there are multiple things that you can do right now with the bits that you're using right now. And one is look at your pass depth, how much material you can remove in one bite, how deep you can make that cut, and how big of a step over. It is generally recommended that your step over be about 50% of your
Okay. I'm getting prompts here. It's generally recommended by the bit manufacturers that your step over be about 50% or slightly less than the bit's cutting diameter. So if you have a 19 millimeter cutting diameter, your step over should be, well, what's half of 19? 9.5 millimeters. So um, if you can go with that heavier, larger diameter shank, then that's going to help you out a lot. So Russell Faraday over in the UK says he runs this Whiteside bit 5 millimeter depth, 60% step over at about 2,500 millimeters per minute with no problem. Again, that's going to depend on your spindle and it's going to depend on your machine. If your machine is stout enough and rigid enough, and your spindle is stout enough and has enough power and torque behind it that you can run those feeds and speeds, that will speed it up just on its own. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope I didn't get too long of wind there. But I would, if you have the capability of using a 12 millimeter shank, I would certainly move up to that. Yes, the bits are a little bit more expensive, but especially on something like this, it is really, really worth it. Really worth it. It also depends, as IL says, it also depends on what wood or slash materials you're carving. Some will carve easier than others. Personally, if you're carving a dense material like maple, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing now. I think I've made my point. If you're carving a dense wood like maple or walnut or cherry or something like that, okay, your spindle is the same as mine. Okay, well then yeah, I would give those numbers a try, and don't be afraid to experiment. Um, I know you have been okay, the 3 kilovolt height. Okay, all right, 3 kilowatt Heitco. Um, I know you've been using that machine for a while now. Don't be afraid to experiment. I don't know what control software you're using, but you should be able to speed up feed rates or slow them down as the tool is cutting. And listen, you will hear if it sounds like that bit is struggling. And if it is, the first thing you can do is slow down your feed rate. Now, again, Russell says he has good success with his 4 horsepower air cooled, which is right at about, oh, what is that? That's about 3K, isn't it? 3 kW, Russell, somewhere in that area. Maybe I'm wrong, but if Russell can run 2,500 millimeters per minute, you should be able to do the same thing. Uh, but keep an eye on it, watch it, and yeah, oak or larch is what he's normally cutting. If the material you're cutting is not quite as dense as something really hard, Purple Heart or Ipe or something like that, then you can generally go a little bit faster. But listen to that bit, and it'll tell you what it wants. So, okay, 4 kW. All right, okay. So, yeah, I would especially with something that big, that stout, and cutting acacia. Acacia is pretty dense. It's not as dense as some, denser than others. It is a pretty hard wood. It's beautiful wood. Um, yeah. Experiment with your feeds and speeds a little bit. I think you can be a little bit more aggressive on your depth of cut, and you certainly can expand that step over. To up to about right around 50%. Because it just depends on the material. It depends on the bit. I use, for instance, a 2-inch diameter fly cutter for surfacing spoil board and surfacing material. You can see I have a Douglas fir slab up on the machine right now. You'll see more of that next week in the video that's coming out next week. And I run it at about 50% of its diameter, so it's taking off an inch of material at a pass. I could bump it up a little bit more, but I also don't believe in abusing my bits. I'm not doing production work. So taking off an inch, a 1-inch wide strip of material per pass is just fine with me. I could probably bump it up to about 60%, but I'm not in that big of a hurry. And I'm not in a production environment doing this for a business where you can basically justify being a little bit more aggressive with your tools, because tools are consumables. But where you have to put out a certain number of parts every week, I don't have to do that. So I tend to be more conservative so I don't have to spend the money. That's what I'm getting at. So, okay. Boy, we're getting some good questions here. I hope that answers your question, Percy. I know that was a long way to go. But you know me, I am long of wind. It's just my kind of, that's just what it's like to be me. Okay, Michael Mazalik has a question for me. Was I on Santa's good or bad list this year? Well, I got a new camera for shooting video, so I must have been on the good list. And you'll see the results of using that new camera in next week's video, which means I don't know how to use it yet, and I had some exposure issues. But hey, the fact that I got a new camera for shooting videos says I must have been good at least a little bit this year. So let's see here. Peter Van Vliet says, this may be a stupid question, no such thing. Is it possible to V-carve onto material that doesn't start as flat stock? For example, picture frame molding that already has a profile milled. It is possible if you have a model of that stock. Now, if the area you're carving on is flat, then it becomes a lot easier. If the area that you're carving on is rounded, has a rounded profile to it, you will need to come up with a model for that profile. And then when you get into your V-carve toolpath, let me come back over here, share screen, and let's take the question down here. So if we come over here into the V-carve toolpath, you have a checkbox down here to project that toolpath onto the 3D model. Now that's what catches a lot of folks, in that you have to have that model before you can project a toolpath onto the model. And fair warning, close this, the molding toolpath is not a 3D model. You cannot project a V-carve toolpath onto a molding toolpath. It doesn't work. So, and I know that from trying repeatedly, trying to game the system and figure out how to do that. So that's the issue. It's not necessarily. If you can find something that is similar enough, if you can find a model similar enough to like the frame material you're trying to carve onto. And what I mean by that is, if you can find a model of, say, a picture frame molding that has the same radius and the same curve that you're trying to carve on, you can import that frame. Let me come back over here and see if I can find a profile in my clip art before I share screen again here to kind of, okay. Yeah, all right. Let me come back over here and share screen again. And this is what I mean here. If we take this profile, let me blow it up here. So we have that representation of a profile. If you're trying to carve down here, for instance, if you can find a molding model that has this radius down here, that might be good enough for you. Okay. But Russell Faraday has a good point here. Sometimes if you have a steep angle here up above what you're trying to carve on, the edge of that V-bit can cut into this here. You have to be very careful, or come down here to carve, it can drop down into here. So your best bet is to either model the profile in a third-party program like Blender is free. Heck, even SketchUp, if you can just get a piece of the model, because you can scale the length. If you can just get a piece of that molding profile in 3D and import it into VCarve, that will help you out no end. This is one of the benefits to having Aspire. It's not strictly speaking 100% necessary, but it sure does come in handy. Now, I know that's easy for me to say. And believe me when I say I'm an expert at spending other people's money. That's a large chunk of money if you're not doing this for a business. As a home hobbyist, yeah, it can be pretty steep. Something else to do, to think about, is if you know somebody who has Aspire, if you can send them just that graphic, for instance, of that profile, that they can make you a piece of that molding profile, export it as an STL, and send you that STL file. So I'm milling the molding myself, so the pattern will vary. Some of them come from a molder head cutter, which has a good predefined form to it. Okay, well, if you can trace the profile of that cutter and send that profile to a friend who has Aspire, they can model you up a piece of that profile, of that molding, export it as an STL, send you that STL, and you're golden. From there, just import it and then project any of your V carving onto it. So I know that's not a clear cut. I know that's not a clear cut answer. It's kind of going around the bend here, kind of going around the world to go to the next block. But Dwayne Ruthig says it's relatively easy to draw the model in SketchUp and import also. Yes, it VCarve does a pretty good job of importing SketchUp files, and I've done a video on that. Let's see, import SKP. I did a video on that. I will link it in the description of this video as soon as we're done. You have to make a few little adjustments and a few little tweaks to get the resolution that you're looking for, but it can be done, and it actually works quite well. So, but this also assumes that you're proficient with SketchUp. So, I mean, there is that. So Brooks Martin says maybe the manufacturer of the cutter might have a soft copy of the cutter's profile. That's that's legitimate too. Very often, if you depending upon who you bought that cutter from, or even if they're still in business, you can get a CAD drawing or a CAD file of the profile of that cutter for just this type of a situation. Not all manufacturers do it, but as CNC technology has become cheaper and cheaper, and more people are buying CNC routers, and more businesses are adding them to the arsenal of their tools, more and more companies are jumping on that bandwagon, and they're providing CAD files for bits and cutters that are not even used on a CNC equipment because they know of situations like this. So you might check with the manufacturer and see if they have a CAD file of the profile of that cutter. So, all right, there you go. I'm not worried about the STL, and yes, Corub Cutters has a good profile definitions available for their cutters. There you go. There you go. You're halfway there because you don't have to hand draw that profile into your software. So, okay, boy, the questions keep coming in. And let's get in here. All right, Richard Canton says Z0 on the machine bed. If you set your cut deeper than the material thickness, will it cut that deep or stop at 0? It will cut that deep. It will. The great thing about a CNC router is it'll do exactly what you tell it to do. The bad a piece of 1-inch thick material on your CNC router, no matter where you set that Z0, the material or the machine bed. If you tell it to cut deeper than an inch, it's going to cut deeper than an inch. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to start shooting it tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Not the next video that comes out next Sunday, the 8th, but the video after that, I'm going to be surfacing that slab, setting Z0 to the machine bed to be able to machine it to a precise thickness. So there will be a video coming out about that. But yes, if you cut deeper than the material thickness, it will cut that deep. It doesn't care what's underneath it. So be very careful. So let's see here. Peter Van Vliet, do you have a vid on 3D projection? Yes, I do, in one of my V-carving tutorials. There is a link in the description now. You have to scroll down for it. That'll link you to the playlist for the V-carving for the absolute beginner. And I believe that is part 4 of that series. It's a 4-part series, and I think that's part 4. But I will track down that video and put a link to it in the description of this as soon as we're done. Okay, so I will add the link as soon as we're finished here. Okay, let's see here. This old man, hi, any suggestions for a homemade machine that won't cut circles? Arduino board, open builds controller, carved comb maker. Always, 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 always check the mechanical first. I don't know if you're lead screw driven, belt driven, chain driven, rack and pinion, ball screw, but always check the mechanical first. You may have a coupler slipping. You may have a belt that isn't tensioned correctly. You could have a belt that's stretched. You could have the axis synchronization off slightly. You may need to calibrate the machine. There are so many variables. The first step, I would get into your okay, back up, stop. the first thing I would do is make sure all the connections are tight, and don't just eyeball it. Don't just eyeball it. Get in and draw a witness mark or a slippage mark. And what I mean by that is the coupler that attaches your motor to the lead screw, ball screw, or even the cog gear that rides the belts or what have you. And I used whiteout or Tipex, as it's referred to sometimes overseas, and just draw a line down that shaft of that motor and then up onto the coupler. That's known as a slippage mark. And what it'll let you do is it'll let you see if that motor shaft has turned and left that coupler behind. If it has slipped at all, you can identify it at a glance. And don't trust your eyes without that slippage mark, because how do you tell one section of the shaft from another? You can't see if that shaft has slipped in that coupler or in that gear. So check those, install those slippage marks, run it a little bit, and see if any of those couplers are slipping. And if they are, address that. If you're not cutting circles, meaning it's oblong in the X direction, there may be a problem with your Y, in that the Y is not going up tall enough. Check couplers, check belt tensions. If there is a problem in your Y, check your X. It means your X isn't moving wide enough when it's cutting that circle. If all of that checks out and you've got slippage marks on and none of these couplers or gears or anything are slipping, it's all good and tight, then get into your software settings. And again, I don't know what controller you're using, but there should be a way to calibrate your machine, which generally speaking, that adjusts your steps per unit, be that millimeters or inches. It may need a little bit of fine tuning. Okay, Kurt Barnes says, you and what you're showing is out of focus. Boy, I don't know what I can do. I had a prompt from my wife a little earlier about something similar. And there's nothing I can do about it. I should be broadcasting at full HD. It may be a YouTube hiccup. There's no issues on this end. I apologize. Okay, Brooks Martin says looks good here, and Matt Haas over at Awesome Wood Things, putting out some good content. Go check him out. I'll put a link in the description. Matt's good people. Write a note here. All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for letting me know that 720 is what you're saying. Yes, that's because that is that's the plan I purchased from StreamYard. For what I do for this, you don't need 1080p. I mean, nobody wants to see this face in super high definition. Anyway, you may have to get in and calibrate your machine so that when you tell it to move 4 inches, it's actually moving 4 inches and not 3.865 or 4.125. And believe me, that is a common problem. So just because you tell it to do something doesn't necessarily mean it's actually going to do that. If it thinks, if it thinks that is 12 inches. Insert your own joke here. Let's move on. Let's see. David Gimmett says, can you elaborate on listening to a bit, please? One of the things I would like to do, and I got to admit, I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit of a chicken to do this. One of the things I would like to do this year is I would like to demonstrate a struggling bit. When I talk about listen to the bit, because you can hear if a bit is struggling, if it's trying to be forced through the material too fast, or uh, trying to cut too deep or something like that. I've been thinking about doing it for a couple of years. I just haven't got the guts to actually do it because I don't want to break stuff. I don't want to destroy things. With this machine, it's a bit more robust. I mean, I've got a couple of old bits that I wouldn't mind destroying. It's just that I have something there's something philosophically wrong with purposely doing that. Maybe I won't push it to the point of breaking the bit. If you hear any kind of loud screaming, anything that sounds wrong probably is wrong. And this is something that it kind of can be taught, but it kind of can't be taught. It just comes with experience. If you hear uh, what sounds like the excellent excellent point right there. It makes different noises against or with the grain, and that is just something that is going to be a fact of life. I did do a video that I don't really like years back about the difference between climb cutting and conventional cutting. And a lot of people put a lot of stock in that, and I really don't. I don't pay a whole heck of a lot of attention to it because most of the work I do, I'm doing both climb cutting and conventional cutting in the same project, in the same tool path. Because think of it this way, wood grain goes in one direction. My bit is going in several different directions. So I'm climb cutting when I go this way and conventional cutting when I'm going that way. So, and when you plunge down into a piece of material and you make that initial cut, you're doing both at the same time with effectively a 100% step over. Your entire bit is cutting all the way around it until it moves. Then it's cutting on three sides. I know it sounds counterintuitive, three sides of a round object, but you're climb and conventional cutting at the same time. You will become accustomed to what that bit sounds like. If you hear a reduction in the speed of your router slash spindle, if you hear, suddenly that spindle go, there's an issue. It shouldn't do that, especially a spindle. A router may or may not do that, but a spindle, the controller should be able to sense that and apply more torque as it's making its cuts. There's going to be a little bit of warble and a little bit of variation. But if you hear something that doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right. So, and again, that just basically kind of comes along with experience, excuse me. Question was more about noise when conventional versus noise with climb. You're going to get a little bit more noise with the climb cut. And that's simply because it's the bit as it cuts into that material, torque and the forces that you're applying to the edge of the material in the climb direction, the tendency is to try to shove that bit away. So you're going to get a little bit more chatter as it's just physics. You're trying to cut down into it against its rotation. Or am I wrong? Is that with its rotation? You got a 50-50 shot at this, Mark. Well, anyway, physics it's trying to force that bit away from the edge that you're cutting, where the machine won't let it, and if you see chatter marks along that edge after the cut is done, that's generally bit deflection or a little bit of flex in the machine because it's trying to shove that bit away from that edge. Whereas with conventional cutting, it's cutting with the grain, and the tendency physics is to pull that bit into the grain. And a lot of people will tell you you always get a cleaner cut when you climb cut. I don't find that to be 100% true. It is a good percentage of the time, but it's not 100% true. My software, let me see what it's set for now here. On a profile toolpath, it's set for climb cutting. I've never changed it. So it's, I don't know. I don't put a lot of effort into thinking about climb versus conventional. But again, the noise difference, you're going to get more noise with the climb cut. But what I'm talking about is the sound of struggle. If there's a shrieking noise or a jarring intermittent noise coming out of the spindle or router, something is wrong. And my first inclination is to slow down the feed rate to give that bit a chance to cut rather than try to plow its way through. So, and it's just going to be something that comes over time, basically. Your ear, you will develop that sense of something's not right. Something's not right. Let me look at what's going on here. So I know that was a long way to go for that, and I apologize. So let's see here. Boy, a lot of questions here. Okay, Matt, what does shank width have to do with any of this? The rigidity of the bit. That's 100% what it is. When you put a 1/2 inch bit in the collet and you need to put quite a bit of that shank in there, that is a much stiffer, not platform, I don't know the word that I'm looking for. That's much less likely to deflect. Where a 1/4 inch shank, even down that low, is going to deflect and bend just slightly if you push it too fast, too deep, or too aggressively. Where a 1/2 inch shank is, it's a stouter shank is going to, a stouter, thicker shank is going to be more resistant to that flex and deflection. This is especially true, and sometimes you can see it if you're cutting with a 1/8 inch bit. You can see you can sometimes actually see a little bit of deflection, and you will hear it as well. So that's what the larger shank, you're just able to push it faster, deeper, and more aggressive, cut more aggressively. Let's see here. Let's see here. Okay, David says, I've been running an Amana 2 3/4 inch surfacing bit on oak at 0.02 per pass and 500 inches a minute. Do you think this is too aggressive or not enough depth and or speed? I don't know. I really don't know. Amana is very good about putting out tool files for their tool. And I'll probably end up doing a video on this, just a little short tips and tricks video. The problem with Amana Tools database is when you download that database, you download the database for every tool they offer, and it is huge. So what I do is, on an older version of the software that I'm no longer using, I think I'm using version 9 for this, I downloaded that Amana Tool database and installed it in that tool database. Then when I get a tool, an Amana tool, I export a tool file for that tool only. And that's what I import into the database, in this case, in version 11.5. That way I'm not cluttering up this database with a whole bunch of stuff I don't even own. And their numbers are usually pretty good. Now, at that speed, you may be able to go a little bit deeper, but experiment. I know it sounds like a cop out, but this is exactly what I mean by experiment on some scrap. I mean, you've been using your machine for a while too. You know what sounds right and what sounds wrong. And if you're getting any kind of burning or anything like that, or it just sounds scary, you're pushing it too hard. Anecdotally speaking, and I do not recommend this to anybody, that a Mana RC2255 bit that I have, the second thing I surfaced with it was a piece of leopard wood, and I made a mistake. I made a big mistake. Mana suggests well, let me bring it up here. I'm not going to screen share. I'll just tell you what it is here. Surfacing. Mana suggests a pass depth of 1/8 of an inch. I made a serious miscalculation and a serious mistake and did not reset Z0 and assumed two pieces of material were the same thickness. I loaded some G code to surface a piece of leopard wood, and it took off at 180 inches per minute, machining off 3/8 of an inch of material. That bit and that spindle didn't even feel it. It hogged through a 3/8 inch depth of cut in one pass, did the entire piece. It was halfway through the first pass before I ever saw it and went, oh my God, what did I do? But that bit and that spindle didn't even feel it. And the finish came out absolutely beautiful. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm not recommending you do that. But I think 50 thou per pass, maybe a little shallow. You can probably go a little better than that. And from what you said, your bit's bigger than mine. So then again, I have the one with the replaceable cutters. And you know, I really honestly thought I had burned up a set of those carbide inserts. Nope. I'm running the same ones now that went through that 3/8 inch depth of cut. And I'm here to tell you, it didn't even feel it. Okay, let's see here. Matt Haas, I've spent a lot of money. Now, how do I use my CNC to make money? Step one, subscribe to this channel. Yeah, right. That's going to depend on your area. Figure out what people want and make that. And that can go in any direction, Matt. I'm serious. I am not in business for myself. I do this as a hobby. And believe me, with the kids, the grandkids, the nieces, the nephews that I have, and with my wife, they keep me plenty busy. So, but something you can do is figure out what you like to make and see if there is a need or a market for that in your in your area. I hesitate to say it, but I'm a recovering real estate agent. Real estate agents give closing gifts when they sell a home uh, to the buyer. Real estate agents love things like simple breadboards, monogram signs with the last name of the buyer, little monogram signs. And they love anything with their name on it. Make a couple of samples and go to a real estate office and tell them you'd like to speak with the managing broker or the managing agent. Every real estate office has a staff meeting at least once a week. and they allow people to come in, make presentations. You can show samples of your work and say, if you want to purchase these items as closing gifts for your clients or what have you, or even for yourself, here's my business card, and off you go. I sat through many a staff meeting with people pitching goods and services just like that. Everything from knife blocks and knife sets to personalized signs and uh, address signs and things of that nature. Uh, there are a multitude of outlets, and believe me, if you do a good job and eh, you develop a good rapport with these people, they will keep you busier than you want to be. So, and personally, my opinion, I would start with the agent you use to buy your house. I talk to them first and see what they want, what they need. There are a lot of people doing charcuterie boards. There are a lot of people doing cutting boards. That's a little bit more expensive than most agents want to spend. And most real estate agents are looking for something in the $75 to $100 range. So if you can find something that you can that is a good amount that you can personalize, because they love that personalization factor. A monogram sign like I've made on my channel, um, they love them, But the thing is, find something that somebody wants, that somebody needs, that you can supply. So, I mean, of course, that's no secret. Let's see. Gilroy says in Pocket and V-Carve toolpaths that use multiple bit size, you say you do the smallest bit first to get the most thin carving support. Does that cause the bit to break since cutting a lot of wood? No, it doesn't. Case in point, the epoxy resin pirate that I made. Now, truth, it is true that I was only cutting a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch deep. But even using that very brittle, very sharp 15-degree V-bit, cutting that first, the tip never got damaged during a cut. The tip got damaged when I dropped the bit. The tip got damaged when I accidentally smacked the tip of that bit with the dust shoe, putting the dust shoe on, but not with the cut. And that's part of the secret there, is to let that bit cut the wood. It's going to plunge straight down because it's as sharp as a needle, and it's going to go ahead and start carving through if you have your feeds and speeds adjusted. Um, it was made to do that, and it will do that without breaking the bit unless you're trying to push it too hard. I always cut with the V bit first. Then I'll go back to my clearance bits because I get a much better finish that way. I don't get chip out on the edges. And I know, yes, you put in say a 1/4 inch end mill and you hog all that out, the V-bit's going to come along and clean up the edges. Well, if it rips out a large piece, it may be more than that V-bit is going to reach, if that makes any sense. So I always run my V toolpath first. It's kind of like outlining before you color in. And it stays between the lines, and all those fibers are cut with that V-bit before the end mill goes in and clears it out. And I use an upcut end mill, which gets those chips out of there and a lot less cleanup. So let's see, get back over here to live here. Boom, 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 boom. Just last night, I took a flask to a local bar, engraved the bar name on it with 2023 date on it, and she ordered 10 of them. Yes. Yes. People like personalized stuff. I mean, if you have a favorite, if you have a favorite guitar shop, for example, why not make a small little wood copy of their sign and take it in, give it to the owner, and ask him, tell him, this is the kind of thing I can do. What do you and your customers want? They may want custom guitar stands. They may want custom guitar hangers out of exotic woods that you can supply that they can't get out of a catalog or ordering online. If you can go to your hardwood supplier and you can get a good supply of quilted maple or bird's eye maple, and you can make a killer looking hanger for a custom guitar, you may only need to get $125 for that hanger, but he can now sell that for $225 and probably order more than you want to supply. Networking, it's 100% networking. Find a need, because a lot of people don't even know they have that need, you know. And be willing to give a few things away, because it's going to come back to you. I tell people all the time that this is, and if you build it, they will come enterprise, because the minute people see what you can do, they'll come up with 1,000 things they needed yesterday that they didn't even know they wanted. So, I mean, it's find the need and fill it. So, okay, we're coming up on, oh boy, a little bit over an hour. Um, let's see here. Rick French says one of the newbie things I still haven't perfected is chips versus sawdust. Not all of us have. Can you open a minute or two on the basics of getting chips? Not in the time we have left. Let me, and I see somebody else asked about chip load. Um, let me, I just wrote myself a note. I won't be able to get into that today, but let me do not necessarily a video on the subject. Maybe I will do a video on the subject, but next week, if we have time after the um, a live Q&A about the video that's coming out, I will discuss it. I'll be a little bit better prepared, because I do need to have some pictures and what have you. And I'll take a few shots when I surface this, so that you'll have some still shots to be able to relate to sawdust versus chips. Because that's one of those it's one of those things that has so many variables, it can go in several different directions. So let's see. Kilroy, do you think the Evan CC you and I have could cut 3/4 plywood with a 1/2-inch compression bit in one pass? Yes. Without hesitation. Yes, I've done it. Let's see here. Now, Matt Haas, what's the best way to cut out a small shape with no tabs? Need a shape to accept a Sharpie marker cap with a notch for the pen clip. Okay, so not a simple circle. Don't want a 1/2-inch circle to go flying. Oh, I see what you're saying. Cutting out that small inside shape. I'm thinking the answer would be to use a wide bit to first hog out a slightly smaller hole, then use a 1/16 inch bit to do the edge. Is there an easier way? It all depends on the tool path that you use. A lot of people don't like it when I say this. Pocket it out. Don't use a profile. Then there's nothing to, yeah, you're grinding away that wood, but you're talking about a 1/2-inch diameter for a Sharpie cap. Pocket it out. Don't use a profile toolpath. Then there's nothing to go flying. Uh, uh, that being said, what you also can do is good old tape and CA glue. And that basically sticks the material down. And most things, of course, what you're talking about is so small, it'll probably go flying anyway. That's why I just pocket out. Most things, though, if they're of any size, they will stay put with the masking tape and CA glue, or painter's tape and CA glue. Um, if not, you're going to have to use tabs. Some people will use a downcut bit and rely on the chips that are getting packed down into that cut to keep whatever it is they're cutting out in place. I don't like that. I'm not a fan. I mean, yeah, it works, but it works until it doesn't. And if that's going to happen to me, it's going to happen at the worst possible time. So, yeah, I would just pocket it out. Then it's all ground into chips and gone in your dust collection system. And it is no longer an issue. Okay, I'm going to get this name wrong. I'm going to say Yankee CSD. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I probably butchered it. Hello, how to draw the lines for VCarve. You basically have just asked me to summarize my entire channel, all 400 videos. There's a link down in the description box to my V-carving for the Absolute Beginner series. It's a 4-video playlist. And there's a link to Vectric for the Absolute Beginner series, which is 50 videos. That will show you everything you need to know to get you up to speed and almost but not quite expert level. Those playlists are there for everybody. Every video I make is on a playlist. And if I don't have a playlist created for a video, I make a playlist for that video so that you can find them easily. So all you have to do is go to my YouTube channel. And in this video right here, as soon as we're done, click on my name. That'll take you to my channel homepage. Click on playlists, and you will see all of the playlists I have created for all of my videos. And I don't mean to be flip, and I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to brush you off, but I'm serious. I cannot summarize 400 videos into one answer in a live Q&A. If you have a specific question about a specific process, I can help you address that. But it's kind of like saying, how do I build a boat? One nail at a time? I don't know. So, with that in mind, excuse me, I've gone a little overboard. We're a lot of bit over an hour, but it's okay. I've alluded to one thing already. There are going to be a couple of changes in the channel, not as far as anything huge or major, but as far as some of the things going on here. I've seen a couple comments about the lighting in here and how everything looks kind of hazy and how everything looks just totally blown out and washed out. I mean, you can hardly read the Avid CNC logo back there. That there's been a couple of times I've kind of moved out of the way and you couldn't read it. It was all blown out. I'm going to be doing a little bit of lighting changes here. I've got a new camera. Playing around with the exposure on that, trying to up my game. I've actually upgraded my editing software. I'm going to try to do a heck of a lot better quality videos for you guys. And I'm going to, I think I've kind of stepped away from my roots a little bit. I'm going to continue to do that, but I also need to get back into some of the reason that I actually started this channel, and that was to help the beginners, figure out that this is not over your head. It's real easy to make assumptions, especially on my part. it's really easy for me to assume that you know what you're doing. And the whole purpose of this channel was to help the people who have never done this kind of thing before. A lot of you folks have got a CNC router for Christmas and have no idea where to start. Well, I need to talk to you folks and let you know that this is not over your head. You can do this. 8 years ago, I couldn't spell CNC. Now I've built 3 of them and assembled one. You can do this. If I can do it, I'm living proof. If I can do it, you certainly can do it. So the only thing you're going to need to do is practice, practice, practice. Keep working with the software, keep working with the machine, take copious notes. I am totally 100% supported by checklists and notes because I'll be honest, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. I certainly can't remember how I did something 6 months ago. So take notes and keep working with it. You can do this. So that's all we've got time for today. Boy, I'm way over, but that's all right. If I didn't get to your question, I do apologize. We will be back next week. And next week will be, I didn't tell you about that. Next week, I'll be surfacing one side of this Douglas fir slab manually using incremental jogging and MDI commands to surface one side of a cupped slab. Then the video that will come after that will create a calculated tool path and machine it down to a specific thickness. So next week is manual machining of one side, and we'll do a live Q&A after that. On my plate coming up soon will be, yes, it's time, tiling tool paths. That will be coming down the road. I'll be doing a bunch of things on various bits, shank sizes, and get into some vertical work holding. And so we got a lot coming up this year. I want to thank everybody who has hung with me through this year. I want to give a special thank you and a special shout out to my channel members. You see them over here. Mr. Gilroy Kilroy is a channel member. Rick French, who was up way past his bedtime last night. Bill Stauffer. These little symbols right next to their name, right there on the end, shows you that they are channel members. I want to thank you guys very much for being members. We members only live stream tomorrow evening, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. If you would like information on how to become a channel member, click the join button down there next to the subscribe button. A little panel will pop up and a video will play, tell you all about channel membership. We have a good time. These guys throw me questions that really mess me up, and I really, really have to dig in and admit sometimes that, I don't know, it's a good time. We have an absolute blast. Hope to see you guys there. And again, whether you, and Teaspoon 20 as well as a channel member. Hope to see you guys there. And until then, I'll see you next week. Go do something cool. Go make some chips. The holiday pressure is over with. It's done. Relax. Now you can make what you want to make for you. Go do it. Y'all take care. Thank you very much for everything.